Hi, I'm Jessie. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Connections Pastor here at Gold Creek, and one of my favorite things that I get to do in my role is get to know new families and help them get situated. So if it's your first time, or if you haven't let us know that you've been here before, would you text Gold Creek to that number on your screen? That'll allow us to reach out and send you a little bit more information. Also, we want to thank you to those that have given of their time and their resources. We can't do this without you. So if you're somebody who's been thinking about it and you'd like to begin giving of your resources today, would you text GC Mill Creek to that number on the screen? Again, thanks for joining us.
Coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me.
Thanks for joining us in this on-demand service. These on-demand services are there so that you can watch it whenever you need to. You can pause it, move forward. This service is designed with you in mind. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you give us comments to let us know how to make these on-demand services even better. And today, you get to respond, even though it can happen at any time when you do it. You can respond in a meaningful way. Someone will respond back to you. Here's a simple way you can respond today. On the screen is a number. Text on to that number, coin. And what we're going to do is we want to send you a coin. We want to give you a coin to remind you of this 4-week series, which is on Philippians. We thought it would be really cool to have this series, and we thought of it to start with, we thought it's testing positive. And we were all excited about it, and then we realized that testing positive in this culture today actually kind of is negative. And so we decided not to call it testing positive. We decided to call it flip it. And we designed this coin that you can flip and think about flipping things in your life. In fact, if you happen to come to one of our services, our in-person services, you're going to find that we're going to have some pancakes and all kinds of things we can flip. But we want you to have this coin. So just text that number right now and you'll have this coin and you'll put it in your pocket and you'll see there's a number of different times I'm going to want you to respond by flipping the coin and reminding you that God wants us to flip the things. Because what we're saying is that there's things in our life that really need to flip. And if we've ever reached a time in life where we need to flip things, it's now. You see, I put these little bylines in here. We have to have a different way to live. We need to have a different way to love, a different way to think. And how do you do that? We believe that through Philippians, this study in the New Testament, you're going to learn how to think different, how to love different, how to live different. I was thinking just a couple of things that I know in people's lives they're going to need to flip this week. This week starts for many of you school at home. Now you knew what it was like because last spring you experienced some of it already and you're dreading this. And it's one of those things that you're looking at and you go, I've got to find a way to flip this around because it's a little negative right now. And there's some of you that are all working at home, and maybe, I think when I understand, 50% of people are working from their home. So not only are the kids studying from home, you're working from home, and that's a negative situation you need to flip. And then I was thinking something else could happen. We're about to start the flu season. So you're going to get sniffles and sore throat, and maybe even eventually you'll find out, wow, I have the coronavirus. How are you going to flip this situation in your life? Well, this study is about flipping those things. And we're going to study the book of Philippians, one chapter a week, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, each week, and learn how to do it. And today's the perfect way to start. And we start with Philippians chapter 1, verse 3. If you don't know the story of Philippians is a letter from a pastor to a church that was really started on accident. He was really not supposed to go to this place, and he ends up at this place, and he ends up starting an incredible church. Well, the story starts this way, or the letter starts this way. Every time I think of you, I give thanks to my God. Now let's just stop here for a minute. Think of that verse. It's on the screen. You can think about it. Every time I think of you, I give thanks to my God. So, what is it that you think about when you think of people? In fact, a number of people should pop in your mind right now. What do you think about when you think of your spouse? What do you think of your kids, your friends, your coworkers? What's the first thought that pops into your mind? Here's what Paul's saying. He's writing this letter to them and he's saying, every time I think of you, I thank God. You want to flip things in your life? You want to get ready to flip it in your life? Start with Thanksgiving. Every time I think of you. Now, I was thinking about that. When you see your spouse first thing in the morning with the hair all bad and the bad breath and everything, if the very first thing you say out of them is, every time I think of you, honey, I thank God. What a great way to start the day. Talk about flipping it. Can you imagine what that makes her feel like, makes him feel like? What about your kids? You know, your kids need to know that when you think of them, you thank God. And I know many times you're in the midst of struggles and battles and you're doing school and all this, and every time you think of them, that's not what you're thinking of. If you want to flip it, in your life right now, start by the very first thought in your mind is to thank God for the people in your life. That means even for you kids that are watching this service on demand. Your parents need to know that when you think of them, you thank God. I know you may not want to, but the way to flip the negative things in your life is to think differently. Even grandparents and coworkers and even your enemy. What if you went to your enemy and said, every time I think of you, I thank God? It would blow them away. The beginning of change, the beginning of the moment that you flip it in your life is a moment you thank God. Now he goes on in verse 4. Whenever I pray, I make my requests for all of you with joy. Which I ask a question. When is it that you pray? Now, really answer that honestly. When do you pray? Now, I think for some people they would say, when I'm in trouble. That's a real honest answer. You know, when I need something, I pray. But here's what I love about what Paul's saying here. He's talking about how he not only thinks about them, but he praises. He thanks God for them, but he then prays for them. Now, if you want to flip something in your life, learn to make some time for prayer in your life. If you're having trouble flipping things from negative to positive, you need to start by thanking God and then adding prayer to your life. Whenever I pray. You know what prayer is simply? It's listening to God and talking to Him. And it shouldn't be just about everything about yourself. It needs to be about the other people in your life. You want to change the culture? You want to change the climate at your work? You want to change the culture and the climate in your home? Start with thanking God and adding prayer. I was thinking how important it is for married couples, for boyfriends and girlfriends, for people that are in relationships. The very first thing you could do every day is to say, how can I pray for you? You know, by asking that question, and then at the end of the day, following it up and saying, how did it go? Wow, does that tell you how your partner, your friend, whoever it is in your life is thinking of you and praying for you and connecting with you? Man, talk about flipping something negative. Maybe you're in a tough situation. Start with that thanksgiving and then add prayer. I was thinking about even for our kids. I was reading an interesting book recently, and one of the things they said about young boys is that as you raise boys in their family, their biggest question in their heart, the biggest question they have is, am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I strong enough? Am I enough for what I want to do, for what I think I should do, for what I want to be? Am I going to be enough? And as you pray for your boy, the boy in your life, whatever boys in your life, think about that, even as you pray for them, and to be able to share with them and to tell them and to reaffirm to them that they are enough. For every girl in your life, you know what they pray for? They pray this prayer: do you see me? Do you notice me? Do I matter? And oftentimes girls will dress for attention so that they can be seen, or even undress so they can be seen. But what they don't want to be seen is on the outside. What they really want to be seen with is on the inside. And even as you pray for the girls in your life, the young girls in your life, think about how you pray for them to let them know that they mattered. By praying for them, you're telling them, I see you. I know what's going on in your life, and I'm praying for you. You want to flip something negative in your life? Start with thanksgiving and prayer. And then the third thing, verse 6, Philippians says this: I am certain that God, who began a good work within you, will continue this work until it's finally finished on that day when Jesus Christ returns. Now look what he says. I am certain. I'm certain. Can you believe this for somebody in your life? Can you say this to someone in your life? So after you've added thanksgiving and prayer, add hope. Hope. I am certain. Hope is something that you're certain of. I call this prophecy. And one of the interesting things that happens for me, and I get the chance to do this, to share what I believe God has given me, a word for somebody in their life, to encourage them, to help them along the way. And I remember as a young man, someone coming to me and saying, you're going to be a great pastor. Now, I don't know at that point whether I thought I was going to be a great pastor. I don't know whether I really thought I had it all together. And I haven't always been a great pastor. But you know what that did for me? It spurred me on to say, that's exactly what I want to do in my life. Can you imagine flipping it in the people around you? See, there ought to be 3 positives for every negative. At least 3 positives for every negative. And most of the time, we tell people what they're doing wrong in their life. We tell them all the things they need to correct in their life. But I think what God wants us to do, to flip it, and what Philippians talks about flipping it is, tell them this: I am certain that God is going to use you. I am certain that God is changing you. I'm certain that God's not finished with you, that He's got some good things. My challenge to you is, sit down with your spouse. Sit down with your kids, sit down with your coworkers, and do something that is maybe uncharacteristic of you. Prophesy, which is to share something that you know for certain that God's going to do. And what can we know? We know that God's not done with us yet. We know that He has a plan for us. We know that He's going to use this. Now, Philippians 1:10 tells us further how to flip it. In Philippians 1:10 it says this: for I want you to understand what really matters, so that you may live pure and blameless lives until the day of Christ returns. What is it that really matters? Here's what matters. Adding purpose into your life it helps you understand what really matters. When you're facing something negative in your life and you add these first 3 things and you add purpose to your life, incredible things happen. And what is that? What does purpose do? It means that we understand how to live. We live differently. What really matters? When we think about it, if I lose money on the stock market, if I lose a job, if I lose my paycheck, if I lose it, is that what really matters? Is it my work that really matters? Or is it my spiritual life? Or is it what Paul said? It's how we really live. It's about the way we live. We live differently. It's not easy, it's just better. Now, I was thinking about that today. How in the world do we reach our cancel culture? You know, our cancel culture needs to be flipped. It's negative. On one side is always negative. And I think, how in the world can I flip our cancel culture today? Well, I can tell you how you don't do it, and that's by watering down the gospel. Our culture needs more than ever before to know the truth of what Jesus Christ can do for you. And so how do you flip it? By showing them a different way to live. It's a different path in our culture. It's not an easy path. It's just the best path. And so what I encourage you is to know what really matters in your life. If you get wound up over the wrong stuff, you're missing the point. Now here's what Paul says. And what we begin to see in verse 12 is that Paul actually is putting into practice what he's just taught us. He said there's 4 things. He said you got to start with thanksgiving, you add prayer, you add some hope, and then you add some purpose. And then when you do that, you can flip it. You can flip that negative to positive. In verse 12, he tells what happened that was negative in his life. I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped me to spread the good news. Do you believe that? Everything that's happened to me here? You know what had happened to Paul? He'd been beaten up. He'd been bruised. He'd been whipped. He'd been hurt in every way you can imagine. And here's what he says. I wish he didn't say everything, because I would like to say that not everything can be flipped. But here he's saying everything that's happened can be flipped, which that's true for you. Do you believe that? If you really believe that, would you relax when the bad day goes on and nothing happens right, and you get to the end of the day and you say, everything that happened to me today, God's going to use for good? That's how you flip it. Even the bad can be good. But how can we do that? We certainly can't do it on our own. This coin says it. On one side it says flip it. On the other side it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's how you flip it. In verses 13 and 14, here's how he's flipped it. Everyone here, including the whole palace guard, knows that I'm in chains because of Christ, because of my imprisonment. Most of the believers have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. I mean, think about that. What do we learn from the very first time? We learned that Paul is writing this letter from a jail cell. We learned that he's in chains, that this situation needs to be flipped. And he's writing this letter teaching us how to do what he's doing in his life. What Paul learned to do is look at things differently. How did he flip it? What's so interesting to me is the way that he flipped it in his life is he began to look at the pain of his jail and his imprisonment. That pain, he says, I'm going to use that for good. So how did he do it? He thought, everyone else looks at it and said, he's captive, but he looked at the people that are coming to take care of him as his captives. He said, every soldier that comes here, everyone that's in the jail, everyone that takes care of me, they have to listen to the gospel, and everybody knows what's going on here, and it's incredible. He used this incredibly negative situation, and he completely flipped it around. You know what I'm convinced today? That you and I, in this time where we seem to be imprisoned in our homes, we seem to be imprisoned by the job situation, sometimes our financial situations. It doesn't matter what your imprisonment is. You know what God's saying to you? You need to learn how to flip it. You need to change it for good. How do you do that? Listen to what Paul said. For to me, living means for Christ, and dying is even better. You know, as Paul faced this in here, he knew that very often the very people would come and that he would talk to them about God would one day take him away and he would die. But he wasn't afraid to die. In fact, you know how he described dying? He said, dying is better than living. He's living in a cell and he's saying, I want to live, and he wants to move forward, but dying is better than living. What's he done? He's completely flipped something that we're afraid of. I think it's interesting, the studies recently for millennials are that millennials are more troubled than anyone else over the coronavirus, which is kind of interesting because they're the least susceptible of all people to die. So why are they so troubled? Why are they struggling so much? I believe it's because so many of the millennials haven't settled the faith issue yet. They haven't settled their relationship with God yet. They haven't settled eternal life. And you cannot really live until you learn how to die. One of the things that I know is that Paul knew how to die. What he said about death, it's better than living. Why? Because he believed in eternal life. Just this last week, I had the privilege of sharing in the most incredible service of a really close friend of mine. And I mean, I'm just so moved by the guy. He was such a good friend. But I mourn for him and I lost him, but the thing that gives me so much hope and the thing that flips it in my life is to know that he has eternal life, that his life is better on the other side than it is on this side. It's the most amazing faith and hope that we can have. Dying is better than living. Paul completely flips it. How about you? Are you ready to flip things in your life? There's one last way that Paul flips it. In verse 29, he says this. You, he's talking about us, he's really writing a letter to us too, have been given not only the privilege of trusting in Christ, but the privilege of suffering for him. I don't know how you flip anything more clearly than that. Suffering is a privilege. You see, the whole chapter led up to this one verse where at the end he says, hey, I want you to know that your suffering, my suffering, our suffering is a privilege. I think today, one of the most important things we can do is to flip whatever we're facing that's negative in our life. Now, I want to do something right now. I want you just to bow your head just for a minute. And I just quietly, in your own thinking right now, I know some of you are in a negative relationship. Some of you having a negative attitude toward the school. Some of you are having a tough time at work. Some of you are having really tough relationships or just personal time with your finances. I mean, all of those things can be so negative. And I just want you to picture God taking that negative and helping you flip it. Now I want you to just think for a minute. You can look at me. I want you to hear this today. On one side of the coin it says flip it. On the other side of the coin it says I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. There's only one way you can flip it, and that's with Jesus Christ in your life. And if you need God's help more than you've ever needed it to flip something negative in your life, I challenge you right now. On the screen is a number, and I want to challenge you to text the word prayer. Someone will be there to pray with you right now in your situation and to ask God to help you flip it. As you do that, I want you to realize this, that Christ is what you need to flip it. For many of others, I want to remind you that this is a coin that we want to give to you. And you can just, at that same number, you can text the word coin to that number in a different text. Just text the word coin and we'll get your address and we'll send it to you. And the reason that we want to do that is because all month long, we want you to take this coin and every time you face something negative, flip it. In fact, I think my wife and I are even going to have a coin. And when one gets negative or the other, we're just going to flip the coin over to each other so that we're reminded that all this month, through the strength of Christ, we're going to flip it. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
Surrounding me, let it break. Let your name still call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every way. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus,
Thanks for joining us today. To keep up to date on what's going on here at Gold Creek, make sure you're following us on social media. Also, download our Gold Creek app or check out what's going on our website at goldcreek.org. We'll see you next time.